Welcome to Rico 12. My name is Justin, and I am a child of an all-powerful and all-loving God and a recovering addict, and am blessed to be the host of this meeting and podcast. Rico 12 is an organization with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addictions of all kinds, and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to gain tools and hope from others who are walking this path. Speakers from our past meetings have represented so many fellowships, addictions, and afflictions, and we look forward to continuing to add to the diversity of speakers and backgrounds. Today's speaker for the 169th meeting is Tom L., who will be speaking on his experience with no longer running the show. We'll get to his talk and the Q&A afterwards here in just a minute. First, for a little bit of business. Just 2 days ago, Rico 12 released a conversation with Anita H. that was done to make up for my mistake a month or so ago when I forgot to hit record with her initial share. And I just double checked. Yes, I am recording now, gratefully. There were some very powerful to me one-liners and recovery topics that were shared in that recording as we discussed many things, including how to minimize the stigma and shame of addictions of all kinds. If you've not yet heard that, you can find it in the Rico 12 podcast or on the Rico 12 website. And I'll post links to that in the chat here and in the show notes. The Rico 12 family of recovery resources continues to grow and have more and more resources for the addict and the loved ones of those addicted. Rico 12 Shares is one of the other super exciting projects that are quickly approaching in July. Actually, Rico 12 Shares started in March. We've got a couple others coming up in July, one of which is a big book roundtable discussion where we will be swimming through the first 164 pages of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with a few recovered individuals who are past speakers in Rico 12 and who really try to know and live the big book. We will also be doing another amazing project on real-life recovery information and solutions as found in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in regards to real-world recovery and life problems. Your donations and subscriptions are making this all possible, as there are costs to build and maintain all of them. On that note, Rico 12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our Step 12 in this manner. We gratefully accept one-time contributions through PayPal and Venmo through the links that I will put in the chat and the show notes. We also offer a monthly subscription program called Rico 12 Spearheads. To join in and help support these cool projects, please consider donating at www.rico12.com/support or click on the links in the chat of the live meeting and the show notes of the podcast. We look forward each meeting to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in each of us, the listening audience. Now I'm going to introduce today's guest speaker for today. This is Tom L. Here's a little bit about Tom. At age 33, recovery found Tom obese, isolated, and dependent on welfare and disability payments. Deeply unhappy and ashamed of what he had become, he had no idea he was an addict. 15 years later, healthy, employed, married, and living free from life-threatening addiction, he was shown that normal living was not enough to keep from returning to insanity. That for him, the spiritual life cannot be just a theory. Take it away, Tom. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Justin. I cannot imagine the discipline it takes to run this outfit you're doing. All I can do is tell my story. Part of my story is meeting Justin several years ago and unexpected circumstances. That seems to be the hallmark of recovery, is a series of unexpected things happening that are good. All right, where did it begin with me? I'm 55 now. And I was an addict when I was a kid. I was first addicted. I have pictures of myself. I wasn't fat when I was, 6 or 7. But I was addicted to television, music, baseball cards, really anything other than connecting with other people. Comic books. When I learned to read, I became addicted to science fiction novels. In fact, I stole money from my parents to buy stacks and way too many science fiction. I couldn't even read it. I mean, so many. I love fantasy, love it. And for me, my body has a strange reaction to various foods, especially highly processed foods. So I quickly became, a fat kid. This, I thought, was hurting my social standing and made people, people would make fun of me in the schoolyards, and I would get very hurt. But there were other fat kids too who seemed to be able to join in with the other kids and have fun, but not me. I became a victim. I tested very smart, and I got into a school for the gifted, which to my ego is the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. You are gifted, my son, gifted. That means you really don't have to do anything. You just kind of receive all these wondrous things. Turns out, no, that school was very difficult, mostly because there were other kids there. And I was also, as I said, I was attracted to the unreal, the fantastic. I would, cut school and stay home and watch TV and eat Hungry Man dinners and just get lost. This seemed to be the most comfortable place for me. I did have friends. I was able to go to school most of the time. I had a very tumultuous relationship with anybody who tried to discipline me, my parents, psychologists, anybody who got in my way, school counselors tried. And as time went on, it always got worse. Now, for me, addiction, there are many people who can live with addiction their whole lives. They may die a few years before their time. They have otherwise good lives. Would they want to be healthier? Sure. But for me, it never ends. It never ends. I have to do more and more and more. By the time I was in junior high school, I was almost unable psychologically to deal with school. I did run up against a school, a dean of students for ninth grade, who was kind of like a parole officer. And this is the beginning of a series of unlikely things that happened to me that saved my life, because I really shouldn't be here. I am not interested in asking for help ever. I will always justify the things that are happening in my life and blame you for it or society. But this dean would not get out of my face. He was relentless. And that was the first time I surrendered, because I'm not that tough. And if someone is, dominant over me, I'm going to say, okay, uncle, I'll do whatever you say. And for whatever reason, I did what he said, and I started my first recovery. I did well for about 3 years, got into a very good high school, lost all my weight. I lost about 100 pounds when I was 17. Got into running. I never got into the social thing again. I was just, my feelings were too easily hurt. But he wasn't in high school. He was in junior high school. So after about a year and a half in high school, he wasn't there. And I went back to my behaviors, which is cutting school, stealing money from my parents to finance hobbies, being lost. This was before the internet, but being lost in books, television, radio, music, anything that I could. I recently had a medical procedure, and this is how I can identify with other addicts. This procedure, as a colonoscopy, required that I take a little bit of fentanyl. Now, fentanyl has a scary reputation on the street, but it's actually a very highly effective medical procedure that puts you kind of in a dream state for just a few minutes if it's dosed properly. And when I was laying on my side, staring at this screen, showing me my colon, I was back where I was when I eat a couple cheesecakes and ice cream and watching TV. I have no problems. Everything is light and airy and interesting, and my mind is free. I do not take opiates without medical prescription, however. So, ice cream, cheesecake, all that stuff affects me in the way that heroin affects a heroin addict. And that's what my first dean said, the dean of ninth grade. He said, you're acting like one of the junkies I have to oversee. And of course, I go, I'm not a junkie. I didn't even think I was an addict. All right, so I dropped out of high school, hung around the house with my dad for about a year, gaining weight, living in my bathrobe. He was not a very good disciplinarian, so I got away with it. And then he said, hey, Tom, why don't you learn a trade? And he's a small businessman. He knew a trade. He taught me it. When I got hope, I remembered, okay, well, I can't eat like this and work. So I started losing weight. I have many diets. Losing weight is never an issue for me if I have good reason. I lost the weight, went to work in New York City, started earning good money in a profession that, not a profession, but, a skilled trade. And for, 2 or 3 years, I was able to fake it. I had a motorcycle. I had 5 fish tanks bubbling in my house. I had a subscription to many magazines, just usually catalogs. I would go through catalogs and say, I want this. How much money do I have? No, I want this. I want this. So all weekend, I would be doing crazy stuff like that. Well, it wasn't crazy to me. To those who understand, it's not crazy. It's research. I'm doing research. After a few years in my mid-20s, I began having the crash cycle come again. I'd start binging on weekends, couldn't get to work on Mondays, call in sick. I hurt my ankle. I have, I would lie about, and I was a good worker when I was there, but I wasn't there on Mondays usually. All right, so then I wouldn't get fired. I'd quit before they fired me. And this went on until I was about 1996, and I was 29. In 1996, I remember OJ had either just gotten arrested or he'd just gotten off. It was something that was the thing in my head, and I gave up on my last job. I was working on Madison Avenue at a law firm, making good money, living in Columbus Circle. I was completely isolated socially, but that's okay. I always thought that's the way I'm built. I'll just do it that way. And I said, I just can't take this anymore. I got in a fight with one coworker, not even a fight. I don't really fight, but she was upset with me. And just being in that vibration between me and her, I can't be here. So I just left. I abandoned my job. They had to send me a box of stuff, in a week saying, sorry, obviously something's wrong with you. You're no longer here. And that point I was thinking, well, I'll just binge for a while, gain weight, and eventually I'll get desperate enough and get another job. That did not happen. At this point, the disease had progressed, which I didn't know I had, to the point where I couldn't function. I went on disability. Actually, I went on welfare first. My dad got me on welfare. I moved in with him and his wife. And I lived in the basement, and then I lived in the attic. I was like the crazy uncle. I was extremely ashamed of what I had become. I assumed I was just mentally ill. I didn't understand why other people couldn't eat like I could. My weight got well over 400 pounds, which when you're in your late 20s is not terrible. It's embarrassing. You have to go to special stores. You can't really move around much, but I had what I needed. And this, my share is for people like me. You don't get out much. If you're watching this or listening to this podcast, it's a speck in the ocean of entertainment that is pouring down on your head because you don't have a normal life. You're lost in social media, which I didn't have back in 1996, but I soon did. And you're hearing this guy talk about your life. Everybody else just enjoy the show, but my message is for the shut-ins, the big guys. I mean, maybe it's drugs or alcohol or porn. I'll get to that also, but it's something that you really can't go outside much. Whenever you look at another person, you think, if you knew what I did all day, you would not want to talk to me. And unfortunately, if you have that kind of mindset, you're not going to be very approachable by anyone. So I have to get into the unexpected events that brought me to recovery. I spent 3 years in a basement apartment in Garfield, New Jersey, absolutely isolated. I was on disability, which gave me $1,100 a month, which is enough for cable TV and the early internet. And I thank God that I had something that gave my life purpose. And for me, it was an obscene talk show that went on Monday through Friday, 5 hours a day. I would record it because my sleep patterns at that point were unpredictable. I could wake up at 8 at night, 6 in the morning. I was completely at liberty to do whatever I wanted. But I love this radio show. And I would listen to it 5 hours a day. I jury-rigged a machine that would record it. And I became part of that show. It's strange. They were my friends. They were my friends. And they were so smart and funny and outrageous. And I felt I was that way too. I never called in, never took part, but it was their my group. This actually prepared me, strangely enough, for 12-step meetings, because it's essentially that. We're a group of very strange, somewhat talented people. We have our strengths. And as I said, I should have died in that apartment. I was uninterested in leaving. I ended up in the emergency room a few times because of when you're at almost 500 pounds, your body does strange things. And when you're eating 6,000 calories a day, every day, that's torture. I didn't feel it as torture, but it's like Bill's story. I identified very much. I'm going to be talking about the big book a lot because I'm holding up a keyboard for a computer. It's the QWERTY keyboard of spiritual change. Is it the best? I don't know. Who put QUERTY next to each other? Some guy in 1935. He did it that way. It works. It seems to be, millions of people seem to do it. There are all kinds of people. I just want to assure you that for a compulsive overeating, masturbating, thumb-sucking, hopeless person, and when I heard someone identify an Overeaters Anonymous that way, I went, how did he know? This QWERTY keyboard of recovery works. But I was 3,000 miles from my first meeting. I was 2 years from my first meeting in 1999. What happened was my mother, who I had been ignoring for a year, I wouldn't answer her calls. She sent me an offer I couldn't refuse. She said, I will take care of you. You can come to California. You don't have to do anything. And at this point, I had been, well, if you live alone on very little money and you're you can't move, weird stuff happens that scares the living daylights out of you. And that had been happening for the last year, where I felt someone was sticking a knife in me emotionally and twisting because I was in such terror. The trouble with me is even that life of absolute hedonism was not enough. I even began drinking alcohol. I was thinking, well, maybe I can just become an alcoholic and give up this other stuff. This is how desperate I was. So I began waking up, throwing up in a dark apartment with vermin in it. Even me, I thought, this is not acceptable. So anyway, my mother gave me that wonderful offer. She bought me 2 airplane tickets, and I flew out to California because I needed. Unfortunately, the seats weren't next to each other, and I was a size 60 waist. I pity the poor person having to sit next to me. Anyway, they move people around, and I was able to sit. That was I was 2 weeks sober at that point because I knew I was preparing for the move. And when you're drunk on your ass all day long, you have to get clean to at least get this done. So I had a motive to do it, and I was 2 weeks not binging, not drinking anyway. Also. And I got to California and I saw palm trees, and my mother has a beautiful apartment in Newport Beach. And I lost 150 pounds in 9 months because that happens. I of course I was a hopeless porn addict by this point, because if you're alone by yourself, a young man, no social life, that's what happened to me. And of course it became, of course, I like to say of course, because it's me, it's not you. But for me, whatever I'm doing, it has to become more and different, or I lose interest. So it got very bizarre in that situation too. So I was living with my mom, eating healthy. I couldn't really get access to the internet in the way I needed, which is 24 hours a day. I lost all the weight, went back to community college, had a girlfriend, my first girlfriend in my entire life, and who was a very sick woman. I'm sure that was a coincidence, but and then I lost it all. I could not do it anymore. And I went back to my mom. I lived in her apartment. I didn't go to school, started gaining weight, eating everything in the house. I stayed away from her purse, and I stayed away from her liquor because I knew that I'd done that when I was a kid, stealing. If I did that, I'd lose all privileges. So I was pretty miserable. And then we started watching this television show. I'll mention it. It's why can't I remember it? It's The West Wing. I don't advocate it. It's just excellent drama. And they had a theme in it about 12-step groups, about Alcoholics Anonymous. My mother and I watched this, and we were like, wow, that's amazing. And of course, I never clicked in my head that I ate like they drank, or I lived like a Skid Row bum. Never occurred to me. It occurred to my mom, and she remembered someone talking about OA in 1970 something, and she said, "Let's go to a meeting." And at this point, I had lost my disability payments because I'd gotten too healthy. And I have to warn those people who live like that and who are on disability, if you want to keep it, don't get healthy, because they'll take it away from you. And getting it back is really, really hard. I tried to get it back. They wouldn't let me in. I don't know why. I found a good doctor in New Jersey, and in California, I couldn't find a good doctor. So I went to my first meeting, and as I said to the people who were attending here, it was a small meeting, 6 or 7 people. There were some young women, there were some old women, there was one guy with a buzz cut, and that was it. And my mother was there, and I was there, and I was going, well, this is part of my, agreement with my mom. I'll listen. And then they started talking about their eating, and I went, well, I'm kind of like that. And they said, hey, wait, you should go to a meeting on Thursday. So I went to a meeting on Thursday, and there was a woman there who was had just a low bottom as mine, if not worse, vast weight, completely crazy life. And she was just a beacon of light and love. And she kind of would slobber on you when she hugged you. She was an older woman, but you could just tell, and you could tell in these meetings, some people were just lights. And I have to bring up this because 12-step groups, atheists are not the majority. And I am an intellectual atheist, which means I use it. I can understand kind of it. I'm not a scientist, but I can understand parts of it. And it makes me feel so superior to all you religious people and all your wild history. And you have good history. You have bad history. You have some people who are just stellar. People in historical, real people who I believe existed, who are just stellar. I admire them, but I don't agree with them. And of course, you have your fools, just as everybody else does. I began hearing the word God, and for whatever reason, it didn't bother me. I could say the Serenity Prayer. I'm a very timid person, social-wise, so I don't get in people's faces about it. But I'm very convinced that I'm right and you're wrong. And so I began going to the meetings, and that happened again. I got hope. I started losing weight, and it was the one thing. And there are some guys in the program, and I began hanging around with these alcoholic, narcotic addicts, compulsive overeaters. One guy was well over 500 pounds. He had his stomach taken out, and that didn't stop him from eating. He became my first sponsor. He had other addictions that related to mine, and he gave me hope. And I lost weight again. In fact, I got down to, 150 pounds, and I'm 5'10". So I began looking like I had a disease, another disease, because I'm not well. Thin is not well, as we say in OA. I also, that first sponsor had some advice for me. He said, the 3 M's, you have to do these. Meetings, you go to a lot of meetings. If you don't go to a lot of meetings, there's no hope for you, especially you, Tom. When you say you feel weird, it's because you are weird. You got to go to a lot of meetings. Second is meditation. I know you're an atheist, got to meditate all the time, pray, call. Outreach calls are really part of meditation. And the third thing, you got to masturbate a lot, because it's all you got, my friend. You can't drink, you can't eat, you can't gamble, you can't do drugs. It's the only thing left. That did work at the time. However, I could never get enough. A little is not enough. Too much is, I gotta get it. Yeah. But that was the advice he gave. And that was in 2003. So that's 20 years ago, my friends. What's happened since then? Well, 15 years went by. I'm looking at on my other screen, I'm looking at a picture of my wedding in 2009. We look like we came off GQ magazine. I'm in a tuxedo. My wife's in a backless dress. My wife, I met in Overeaters Anonymous. She's a 100-pounder as I am. We call ourselves that, the ones who have known a burden of 100 pounds or more. And we found each other there, thin, if not well. We got married in 2009. We're still married in 2023, which should not be. I had gone to a lot of meetings in OA all over California. And I'd gotten permanent work. For the first time in my life, I held a job more than 6 months straight. I'm in my 17th year of holding a job at a government agency, let's just put it that way. And that should be the happy end of the story, but it's not. Because in 2015, my wife discovered my other life, the third M. She found a Kindle book that I had bought. Now, for me, visual pornography is wonderful. There's vast libraries of it, anything you could imagine. But what I prefer is not legal, and I don't want to go to prison. So, novels. You can write about anything using any words in any language you want, and it's not illegal. So luckily, she didn't find one of those books, but she found something that was not of the norm. So she said, "What's up with this, Tom?" By the way, she has 3 daughters. One was still living at home. 2 had moved out, and she had reason to be concerned. And this, I went to my OA sponsor and told him the situation. And in OA, we're not judgmental about these things. He said, "Tom, do you really want to be married? Is this an important thing for you? Because with this side of your life, it's obviously very important to you, and God forbid that I stand in the way of it, but it's incompatible with being married unless you have a very specific agreement with your spouse." And part of my, at the time, I'm a very dependent person, and my wife is a very strong person, and she took care of a lot of stuff in my life. And I thought, yeah, no, I want to be married. So he said, okay, you may want to investigate the S programs. And this is a very subtle way of describing the sex programs. Because, yeah, you got a problem, and you're going to lie about this. You're not going to be able to stop this. And I said, no, I'm not going to be able to stop this. So I started going to those programs, and 3 years went by. I stayed married. I stayed healthy with food. I stayed employed, and and I got sober in Sexaholics Anonymous, SA. It's one of them. It was the one she chose. They all have different definitions of sobriety, and she went, "I like this one. No sex with self or people other than the spouse." And so I went there. And if you think OA has religious people in it, oh my God, SA is 99% deeply religious people. And they tolerate me. But I got there and I got sober in their way. And I spent about 9 months feeling good about myself and being honest, not having a double life. Where are we, Justin? I don't want to go run over.
You got about 3 more minutes, and I know that's a tight wrap up, but try and wrap it up here within about 8 minutes or so.
8 minutes. Oh, cool. All right. So if you're a hopeless, shut-in, media addict, compulsive overeater, narcotic addict, sex addict, and you don't leave the house, that story should say, maybe there's hope for me. Now, this second bottom that I reached was okay. So a year went by. I left. I lost my abstinence in OA, and then when I was going to SA meetings, because they don't care if you eat cheesecake in front of them. We often eat dinner right in the meeting. The spiritual connection was lost, and as an atheist, that's hard to explain to myself what I just said. For religious people, it's not a big deal. And the spiritual connection was lost, and I was an alien in enemy territory. I could not be in that meeting. And I could not be in OA either. So I left, and I lived on my own power. Tom was running the show from 2017 to 2021. I am smarter now. I've been with you guys for a long time. I didn't eat sugar. I stayed away from that. I didn't drink alcohol. I've been sober since 2006 with alcohol and narcotics. I lived a double life using I never had a smartphone because my wife would not tolerate that. And I just never had one. So I would use other people's computers. I would use work computers. endangering my job, and being very secretive. And also, I'm planning my escape. I'm an obsessive person. I discovered that, okay, what if I get divorced? How am I going to survive? I have a job that doesn't pay very much. I need to live in a van. And I spent months counting on my employer's time, on my own personal time, trying to figure out a way that I could live in a van. And this made sense to me. This is not God's will. This is how you tell it's not God's will. It's feverish. You can't stop thinking about it. It doesn't give you rest. If you're upset, you start thinking about it this way. It's a demonic machine that will not stop of how can I run the world? So I was 100 pounds up again, which is tolerable. So I'm 280. So what? I went to a social event with my family. I went back to work. I came home I think it was a Tuesday night, and my wife was standing at the door, and she says, "You can't come in," because she had found my secret stash. And now this is what she tells me. I did not hear this. She said, "If you go back to SA, you can stay." What I heard was, "You can't come in because my disease doesn't want to give up." For the next week or 2 weeks, I lived in my car. So I got my wish. I lived in my car. I showered at work. I tried to get money out of my retirement account because I have a lot of money built up after 15 years. And every plan failed. As with my first recovery, where I should not have left that basement apartment, there is something, I believe it's in myself deep down, that is disabling my disease enough to get me to ask for help. Everything failed. And eventually I called someone for help in Overeaters Anonymous. This is a man who has lived his worst life as I had. He had 6 years of recovery. He got me back on the path. I went back to my SA meeting, and they looked at me and they squinted. "Is that you, Tom?" Because in OA, we're chameleons. We expand, we contract. And they said, "We're so glad you're back." And I was in torment. I did not want to be back. But I had no other place to go. And I surrendered. Before I started living in my car, and I'll end with this, I was in a hotel room on borrowed credit cards that my wife soon canceled. I knew I would have to be living in my car. I got down on my face in this dirty carpet, and I said, "God, I give up. Help me. Help me. Whatever you want. I know the drill. I've seen it in meetings. I'm talking to whoever the hell you are. Help me. I'll do whatever you want." That was 22 months ago. And I'm still married. I'm still employed. I'm back at my normal weight. I'm not on social media. I don't drink caffeine. I don't drink Diet Coke. I don't care about any other diet soda. Diet Coke is of the devil. It is so good. I will drink buckets of it. So anything like that is gone. It should not be gone. I don't want to give up these things. I have replaced it with people like Justin, the hundreds of guys in my phone, men's retreats, sponsorship chains, books, recovery podcasts like this. I have to be that way because I want to live. And plus, as Ebby said to Bill, he had been raised from the dead, taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had never known in 60 freaking days. Had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in Ebby than there was in Bill. He had come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. I cared to have it. And I could talk about my higher power, but it's when you talk about your higher power, it irritates me when you get too specific. If you're interested, I'm happy to talk about it. Thank you for letting me share. And thank you, Justin, for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Tom. Good stuff. I appreciate it. I love hearing your story, and I heard more of it this time than I've heard before. Good stuff. I really enjoyed getting a little bit more information about you and how that works. Powerful story. Deep bottoms, and where you're at today is beautiful. And, I just really appreciate that. And I would love to hear a little bit about your higher power. I think that we'd love to hear how that works, because exactly. But as you say, hey, I'm an intellectual atheist. This higher power stuff is crazy weird. Tell me a little bit about your higher power.
I'm going to do this in a friendly way. My theory does not deny the fact that there could be a supernatural higher power. I'm a human being. There are billions of others like me. Sometimes human beings get into huge trouble. Those of us in 12-step programs know what that's like. But you have a mindset that will not let you give up. So if this happens in the normal, in our historical life, we would have been shunned or our heads would have been cut off, burned at the stake, not taken care of. I mean, life was hard in our history. I mean, if you didn't have firewood, you died. So what happens? Well, those of us who are too tough, we died. Millions of us, addicts, misanthropes, violent people who couldn't get along with other people. We have all kinds of reasons that could lead you to that kind of impasse. Those of us who survived, there was something in our constitutions that allowed us to go like this. Help. Like a dog rolling over on its stomach, on its back. You can tear my guts out if you want. I surrender. That is a faculty that is built into us. Not everybody. Some people die. So from a Darwinian point of view, there's that. Maybe God uses Darwinism. I don't know. The second thing is there's a word in the big book that never appears, and yet there's a lot of passages that talk about it. Its opposite is there. Anything that talks about a higher power is the opposite of this word. Bill uses the opposite that we are more familiar with once. He says, quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. The opposite of master is slave. Slavery is very common in human civilization. Those who couldn't become slaves didn't survive. And many of our ancestors were slaves. We have the ability to give up and completely follow someone else's will, even if it leads to our own demise. And that means I have the capacity to do that today if I have a slave's mind. And my sponsor is not my master, God forbid. The QWERTY keyboard, that is my master. I can use every prayer in it. It opens everything in religious life to me, because there's something out there that if I follow it, and I know in my heart what it is, it's goodness, and I'm free. So try that on for size.
Man, so that concept, or that digging into it from the slavery master side of things is a way that I had not looked at it. Thank you for sharing that, and I'm gonna ponder on that, because that's good stuff. A reminder to our live audience: if you have a question for Tom, please type it in the Q&A link at the bottom of your window. Looks like two speech bubbles over the top of each other. We do have a question that's come in from an anonymous attendee. This person says, what are you able to read now, and can you read fiction at all anymore? I have a similar issue with media.
I have to be extremely careful. Like, for instance, I love technical podcasts, and I can't control them. I will spend all day on YouTube. What can I read? I'm reading about history. These are not easy books. They have footnotes. They're not quick, sugar-like things. If we're going to equate them to foods, I stay away from the junk food reading. Can't do it. I have to read stuff that requires careful attention. I may lose control of it. I don't know. I read it before I go to bed, but I don't read it during the day. I listen to podcasts, recovery podcasts, even religious podcasts work. And I talk to other people. So you have to find something else to do with your life, pal. And this is it.
Yeah. So Tom, that you got to find something else to do with your life, pal. Yeah. When I find something that I numb out on, it's a painful realization when either I find it or someone else points out to me, which is usually the case. Hey, Justin, you got to find something else to do with your life, pal, because that isn't working for you. That's killing you. And I find it so interesting, Tom. And I've shared this with some people in my own recovery network, how one of my mentors in recovery, one of my sponsors in recovery, is an avowed atheist, and yet to hear him pray the Serenity prayers, to hear angels singing. And you mentioned that some of the podcasts you even listen to are religious podcasts. What benefit does that give you in your own mind? Tell me a little bit about that processing of you doing that. And this is a lot more about God than I anticipated it being. Maybe we'll go somewhere else after this.
Well, religious people, especially in the Western tradition, have been thinking about things like this very hard for thousands of years. And I believe they have some interesting insights. In fact, like us, they hit bottoms that they should not have survived. And they were able to hold together communities over hundreds, if not thousands of years against incredible odds and diseases and, everything. It's a treasure house. Spiritual literature of any civilization is a treasure house of survival, of just the human spirit overcoming disaster. Can it be used badly? Sure. But, it's all concentrated, man. It's all there. And if you have an open heart and open mind, you can find things that'll help.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of a passage, see where religious people are right, from the Big Book.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit, Tom, about some of your favorite passages from the Big Book that really help you as you walk this path.
I've been spending a lot of time with Bill's story because I love Bill. He's smart like me. He's arrogant like me. If I had more guts, I would have. That's my style. There's a phrase. He uses a lot of phrases about how terrible drinking was, but there's a phrase that gets me because I remember being in my basement apartment with gray light coming in through the window. Anybody approached my door, I was terrified. He said, of course, in late that November, I sat drinking in my kitchen with a certain satisfaction. I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle near the head of our bed. That is the prison I was in. He was using his wife to keep his ass drunk. And he was figuring out, because he had to drink, he had to be carried. Alcohol was carrying him. He should have died. His musing was interrupted by the telephone, the cheery voice of an old school friend. What? Where does this? Without that phone call, dead man. And my wife's sponsor says God launches search and rescue missions for addicts. We ain't looking for him. He's looking for us. My idea of God is somewhat synthetic. I'm not going to bore you with it, but he's really interested in us if we want him enough. So Bill's story, can't get enough out of it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And, you've talked a little bit about your wife in this and how you and she are both in program. Tell us a little bit about some of the benefits of both of you being in program and maybe some of the hurdles that have to be crossed in having both partners in recovery programs.
We've been sober together over the 16 years we've been together, actually longer, got together in 2006. We've been sober together and drunk together. We're not social drinkers. We don't drink with each other or drink. We don't eat with each other. We pull away and we go watch TV in separate rooms. And in recovery, we're the fashionable couple. And then we have to live with each other. This is the hardest project, except for recovery, that I'm involved in. It is, especially when we're both sober, the sparks fly. And sometimes we get, to the point where we got to split up. And then one of or both of us talks to our sponsors and other people and we come back together. I believe our higher power is in that house. We live in a very crowded house, 4 generations in one, from my mother-in-law to my grandson. And it is part of the ongoing miracle of being alive. My wife says, "Do you really love me?" And this is probably the central question of our existence. Is like, can an addict like me love anyone? And if I say that, drives her up the wall, because that's not what she wants to hear. She is the most important person in my life besides my higher power. And she often switches places with my higher power. So yeah, this is an ongoing thing. My wife will probably be listening to this at some point. But yes, she is. I don't think it could work any other way. God put her in my life. He put me in her life. Poor girl. And it's the raw material for God to use to make me a better person, because it's so in my face every day. Hope that wasn't too passive aggressive.
No, but you said something there that I want to dig in a little bit, if you're willing. You said, especially when we're both sober, the sparks fly. Why do you think that is? When you're both sober, the sparks fly, and you've got to separate sometimes or step away from each other for a minute until you talk to your sponsor. Why do you think that's the case?
It goes back to thin is not well, sober is not well. I'm an extremely self-centered individual, and I don't want anybody getting in the way of my fun. And a spouse lives cheek by jowl with you and will get in your way. So from my point of view, it's, I don't want to be observed, because I grew up and my head still is in that basement apartment where I am king. It's a small kingdom, but I'm in charge. And with a marriage, that's never true. Nobody's in charge. It has to be a dance.
Yeah. So, thin is not well, sober is not well. Define for us your understanding of sobriety versus recovery, or, whatever that what is well versus what is not well.
Yeah. What do I have to give up? What can I control? If I can't, there's no world where I have unobserved eating. It always goes out of control. So, in OA, it's a food plan, a nutritionist, and being honest with my fellows. In SA, it's I don't touch myself. I don't watch inappropriate material. In fact, I don't watch screens alone at all. I'm watching a screen now, but you're here. So, yeah. So, as I said, I also can't do certain. So there are physical things where if you put it into my body or put it into my vision, I can't be sane. I can't act normal. But take all that stuff away from me and lock me in a box. That's torture. That is absolute torture. Back to the slave business. I have to be a good, willing bond slave to my higher power, or I get very uncomfortable. Now, I don't have to be. God, my higher power says you can walk right out the door, do whatever you want. But I have for you a home here, house of my I'm in the house of the Lord. I can't see it, but I'm in that house. And I forgot the question, but I love the 23rd Psalm so much.
Yeah. So the question was define recovery versus sobriety, freedom versus bondage. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're in the house of the Lord or not, that's recovery, is being in the house. Got to be in the house. Got to be a good member of that house, adopted son.
That puts quite the dichotomy in there. I'm either in bondage to food, to sex, to gambling, to drug, whatever it may be, or I'm in bondage to my higher power.
Yes.
Do those handcuffs look and feel different to you?
This is where the English Protestants' writings helped me a lot. There is no independent freedom. Not for addicts, certainly. I don't know about regular people. I'm not regular. But it has to be submission or surrender. There are all kinds of words, but I prefer slavery, willing slavery. The Old Testament New Testament uses bond slavery. I love that that image of bond servant who willingly says, "You can't sell me. I am yours forever." And my master says, "Yeah." So yeah, that's there is no independent. I tried. I'm going to die trying if I keep trying. So to hell with that.
Love it. Very good. All right, Tom. Well, before we start wrapping things up, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us?
Media addiction. If you're really attached to this screen and you can't imagine getting through life without this screen, know that there is hope. There are 12-step groups available. You can't even imagine giving it up because it's such a new addiction. Our ancestors never had anything like this. Twitter, man, Twitter. I would give my life for Twitter. I haven't been on Twitter for a while. But there is hope for that. And if you want to, I'd love to talk about my experience with that as well. But if anything that gets in the way of me being a good child of my creator, and boy, can social media get in the way. It can get in the way unless you use it for recovery, which is valid. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I'd love to have you back in the future sometime, maybe talk about the media side of things, because I think that's something that, like you said, is a brand new experience for us humans. All this, I mean, we have millions of years of history of some of the other addictions that we've talked about here. Maybe millions is an exaggeration, but maybe not. But this is a brand new thing, and the experiment is crazy. Anyways, thanks again, Tom. That was a great RICO 12 speaker meeting, and for addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction. If we didn't get to your question here in the live audience, or if you have questions out there listening in podcast world, please consider joining our WhatsApp community by sending an email to RICO12pod, RACO12pod @gmail.com, and join in our community to ask those questions, answer others' questions that may come up. If you're inspired and want to share something of your insights in a 12-step type share, please go to RICO 12 Shares SpeakPipe link that I've put in the chat here, and also will be in the show notes, and record your 2 to 4 minute share there. If you've not yet rated and reviewed the podcast in Apple Podcasts, if you listen in Apple Podcasts, please go do so now. It's a great way to work your step 12 and sharing this message with others and allowing this platform to be easier accessed by those seeking recovery. I invite the audience to come back next week. Young L, another first-time RICO 12er, will be speaking to us, and his talk will be entitled, "We Have Entered the World of the Spirit." And I love this topic, and I'm excited to hear from Young. Now let's launch off into the rest of our day with the third step prayer of Narcotics Anonymous. Tom, do you have that? Do you want to say that?
You sent that to me. It's so simple. I don't have it on the screen. I'm sorry.
Okay, I will do it. I will do it. This is the third step prayer of Narcotics Anonymous. Many of us have said, "Take my will and my life. Guide me in my recovery. Show me how to live." And that's that third step prayer. Remember, everybody, there's one who has all power. That one is our higher power. Whatever that higher power may look like to each of you, may you find God in that higher power now. Keep coming back. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
Seen stars fall from above. I've fallen in and out of love. I've been high and I've been low. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. I've seen a boy become a man. Got lost without a plan. He's so far away from home. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. No searching for purpose all alone, 'cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. looking for the words to say. You make the world a better place, and I can call that place my home. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me, your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. So let me see just what you need to set you free, so we can be. I saw stars fall from above. I fell in and out of love. I got high and I fell low, but now I know that I just can't do this on my own. No, I just can't do this on my own. I just can't do this on my own.